This is the Sinful Savants Halloween special. Welcome, ladies and gentlemen. These stories are all based on my subscribers, the Sinful Society, you sinners out there. I want to say a special thanks to each and every one of you that took the time out of your busy schedules to send me your story. I hope I do your stories justice, guys. Sit back, prepare to be spooked, and I want to wish you all a happy Halloween from the bottom of my heart. Thank you guys so much for all your love and support. I can't wait for this upcoming year as well. Let's begin. Number 1. Submitted by Loki's Witch. I live here in Vancouver, Washington. I've been here a rather long time for me, almost 6 years now. I recall one Halloween, it was a rather nice night, and we had friends over. All 9 of us went out with the kids that lived around my place. The mother of the 2 kids knew us. She asked me to look after them for the evening, and we did. All of us and the kids had an amazing time. I did get them and their friends home by 9 p.m. At 9:30 p.m. we got down to what all pagans like to do. We had made a place in the backyard. All of us had a candle going and welcomed the kind spirits around us. I know that sounds odd, but I'm a witch, so to me it is a day-to-day thing. This was all going fun and well, and we all got this calm feeling. The person that was leading the whole event told us what he wanted to do. It did make me and others start to wonder if he needed help. He told us we would need to put a drop of blood in a cup of wine to open up the third eye. I did not want to do this, and I did not take the cup at all. Not because there was blood in it, but the feeling that if I did, it was not going to end right for me or others. One other person did the same as I did, and passed on the ritual. In the end, 7 of them participated. Then they all went to a graveyard. The graveyard they went to, I don't really particularly like. But if you know Vancouver, you may know of the Old City Vancouver Cemetery on East Mill Plain Boulevard. I don't even go there during the day. It just has a sad and fearful feeling to it. They all went as I stayed home, and I was yelled at by my ex on my cell for not calling them and putting my friends before her. But after I got off the call, I went out to get something to eat. Then I saw something that made me very happy I stayed home. My friend was there too, so I knew I wasn't losing my mind. We both saw something standing in the backyard. It was covered in white and crying. We both should have noped out, like the smart 25-year-olds we had been, but we went outside anyway. It looked like a woman, and she was holding the cup that had held the wine. She was saying something about how they had been fools. Then, she was gone, and the cup lied empty on the grass. After the others came back, they all looked like they had just seen death. I later sat and talked to the one of them that, to this day, keeps her faith in God. She was about to go in but stopped. She told me all of the lights had been on all around them, but she could not see one light at all in there. Something told her to stay out of the graveyard. She did as she was told. Others did not. One girl has never got over it, and now never leaves her home. Most people play it off as nothing, but pagans making things up doesn't likely happen. I trust the ones that told me this, and what I saw with my own eyes. After that night I had seen more things around the place we had lived. I moved away from there about 8 months later. I never have talked to the person that was leading the sinister evening that night. All I know is he became a different person after that. Darker in how he talked and how he was trying to make us all think. Last thing I heard, he was in jail on child pornography charges. No one knew that day what he had been looking up or doing. So whether or not it is true, things do like to come out at night, but you should know not all of it is bad. Some good can come from it. A friend had a dream. In the dream, he had a son with him. Later, he had to fly and get his son from his ex. They are living happy now. It helped me open my eyes about what my ex was doing. Trying to control my life over a phone, pushing me to almost drop out of school. That night I will never forget. Number 2. The story was submitted by Dark Nova. This is a true story that happened to me when I was 10 years old, living in North Carolina. When I was a baby, my parents split up, leaving me with my mom, who was a drug abuser. Eventually, my mother lost custody of me, so I moved in with my grandmother in an empty neighborhood. My grandma saw how depressed I was, so she decided to take me trick-or-treating in the more wealthy neighborhoods. It was fun, but I felt as if this gray truck seemed to keep following us the whole evening. We left to go home after I told my grandma I didn't feel in the mood to trick-or-treat anymore. We went home, but I felt as if the truck kept following us. I asked my grandma if she remembers seeing that truck before, and she said she wasn't paying much attention, but not to worry. So, like any kid would do, I decided to go back to sleep in the car. When we arrived at the house, she put me in my room, which was on the second floor facing the driveway, and then she fell asleep. I suddenly woke up because I saw lights coming from the window. I opened my window and saw two men who were in a truck, and they told me that I had dropped some of my candy and that they came to return it. I told them I would ask my grandma if I could come outside, but they tried to convince me that grandma was sleeping and people at that age need their rest. I told them that I didn't want to worry her in case she went to my bedroom and found it empty, so I told them I would go ask her. When I woke her up and told her what the two men had told me and asked if I could go get the candy, she immediately called the police. When we checked the window, the truck was gone. When the police arrived, we told them what happened, and they told my grandmother something that still frightens me to this day. Apparently 2 prisoners had escaped and were sighted in the area attempting to kidnap kids. I still have nightmares of what could have happened if I would not have woken up my grandma, if either one of us would even be alive today. Story number 3, submitted by Elisa. This started in August 2013 and ended in November 2013. I hope it's not too long. Everything is true. I don't drink or do drugs, to get that out of the way. It was me, my husband, our 2 girls, and Bruce, our dog. At the time, our oldest daughter was barely 3 years old, and we will call her Alexa. Our youngest was only 7 months old. She's not in the story. Just an honorable mention. Our dog Bruce was 5, and he'd just beaten parvo, a terrible and deadly puppy disease. Anyway, on to the story. My oldest daughter Alexa was showing signs that she had an imaginary friend. She was having tea parties, sharing stuffed animals, etc. I was actually impressed. I encouraged her to play and continue her fun. Besides, imaginary friends are harmless, right? One day, I had to know what my little girl had made up in her beautiful and creative mind. Alexa, what's your little friend's name? She had a confused look and said, she doesn't have a name. Odd, I wondered. Well, what does she look like? She then perked up. She's pretty, but I can't see her face. And she wears all black and has long black hair, ending it with excitement in her voice. What the fuck, I thought to myself. Tell me more, babe. She's a big kid. She's looking for her mommy and daddy. They left her. She is so nice, mommy. I told her to stop playing with that thing. It creeped me out. After some time, Alexa comes up to me and says that I will see the little girl. Oh, really? I thought to myself. Halloween was coming up, a week away actually, and I thought if my life is a cliche, I'll see her on this holiday. Nothing happened on that day. I soon forgot about my child's play demon. It was a couple days after Halloween when I left Bruce outside in the backyard. He's usually inside, but that particular night it was warm. It was around 12 a.m. when I heard him barking. He's a great dog, so when you tell him to stop, he usually does. This night, however, he didn't. I tried waking up my husband, and the big bad man he is told me to go find out what Bruce was barking at. Completely frustrated, I got up. Our porch light was out, but the neighbors around us had bright lights, so our yard was illuminated quite well. The backyard was in an L shape. I saw Bruce barking at the fence that was near me. He was so fixated on it, he wouldn't stop barking or come to me. I decided to look where he was barking, and holy shit, I saw something. It was wearing a black dress, with long black hair, with its face towards a wooden fence. It was as if she was counting for hide and seek. I needed to nope on out of there, but Bruce still wasn't listening. I did the whisper, "Get over here now." After 2 times, it was too long. I look over to the black thing and it starts to run towards me. No, 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 nope. I yelled, "Bruce, get inside now." He ran so fast, his tail in between his legs. I shut the sliding glass door and put all the lights on. I even went as far as to play Christian music on the radio. I told my husband, who didn't believe me. Needless to say, I did not rest that night. After that night, I didn't have any more creepy things happen. My family wouldn't come inside my house anymore because they felt it was so weird. We moved out 2 years later. My daughter is now 6 years old and has no memory of this imaginary girl, but it is intrigued by the story. Whether ghosts or demons are real, I know that thing I saw was real. Story number 4. Submitted by Elisa. The first time I ever saw anything was when I was 14, back in 2004. I was staying with my aunt and cousins that lived in the Bay Area, which is San Francisco. They claimed that the house was haunted, but I sure didn't believe it. My cousins, who all changed names, Becky is 2 years older than me, and at the time I was in Mexico at an all-girls school. Norman is a year younger than me. Both of us had bedrooms upstairs, but wouldn't sleep up there. In fact, after dark, they wouldn't go up there for anything. I would notice things, such as a closet door opening when I knew it was closed before I left the room. I heard walking around noises coming from my cousin Becky's room when she wasn't there, but I didn't think it could have been a ghost. After a couple of weeks staying there, my parents came back to pick me up, but the car had broken down and we had to stay an extra week. During that time, my aunt asked my dad to set up an alarm to the gate that led to the backyard, because the gate would be open. We would hear the alarm, but no one would be there. My mom suggested that we would pray the spirits away. It was me, my mom, my aunt, and my 2 cousins. So we did what any normal family would do. We sat around the dining room table in the dark house with our Bibles open, taking turns reading with poorly lit lights above us. It was my cousin Samantha's turn to read a verse. Before she could finish, she covered her face and started crying. She said that she saw her son, who wasn't there and only 2 years old, right next to her. Whatever it was, it didn't have a face. At that moment, we all saw it. I'm getting goosebumps writing this. It was about 1.5 feet tall, very pale skin. It crawled up the wall to the ceiling and around the corner. Before it vanished completely, it turned around and its face looked to be swirling around. My mom began praying. We all joined in. After that, we saw white smoke in the middle of my aunt's backyard. My mom said that the spirits were leaving this place. Our car was fixed and we went back to our home. My cousins started sleeping in their rooms, and they've never had any more problems, or at least not that I know of. Story number 5. My husband and I really wanted to move out of our apartment, more than anything. We would drive around town and search for a new place to live. It really didn't matter at the time. We enjoyed the drive and the company, and we hated our apartment so much that any excuse to leave would be a good one. This particular night, it was a little after midnight, and our kids were passed out in our car. We were in a less than desirable part of town, and I told my husband to take us away from this place. He was making a U-turn to take us back home. That's when I saw it. I saw what I can best describe as a man in a black hoodie, with very baggy black pants running towards my husband's side of the car. I didn't feel fear. I was wondering what was going on more than being scared. Before it could run into our car, it disappeared, right before my eyes. That's when fear hit me. I looked forward and tears started falling down my face. My husband asked me what was wrong. I couldn't speak. I couldn't understand what I just saw. I couldn't comprehend it. And why didn't he seem to be freaked out? Turns out he didn't see it, but I did. I still wonder if it actually came into the car. A few days later, we were doing the same thing, driving around town. This time it was during the day, and we were on the south side of town. You don't want to be on that side of town. We got lost trying to leave that side of town when I drove by this one. Person? Creature? Whatever it was pounding its chest, which had 3 scars on it. We couldn't see the bottom half of his body, and his face was swirling around. We noped the fuck on out of there, and then saw a security guard. We told him what we just saw, and he didn't seem surprised. He said he doesn't go down that street because he has had bad experiences. I don't blame him. After that, we found our house and I saw the girl in the backyard. I haven't seen anything since then. I mean, I wouldn't mind, to be honest. Story number 6, submitted by J.T. Oak. I'm a 32-year-old male. When I was in 7th grade, I developed an inseparable bond with my friend Preston. I viewed him as a second brother that I never had. He was the type of person that was always comfortable with himself in any situation. Everyone looked up to him, and his presence made everyone feel welcomed. The summer before high school rolled around was the summer where his influence stripped me of my innocence. He quickly discovered how to bartend out of his parents' liquor cabinet and knew how to throw a good party. As time went on throughout high school, we stopped hanging out. I was bothered by his choice to hang out with an unexpected group of people. I say this because I knew it would ultimately lead him down a path of destruction. Like any friend should do, I tried to pull Preston off this path of destruction, and one day called him out on it. Fists were thrown, some not-so-nice choice words were said to one another, and the last time we ever spoke, Preston said to me, "Don't ever talk to me again. I resent you, and I will haunt you in your dreams." A few years later after high school, I heard Preston's fiancée had passed away. I tried reaching out to him but had no luck. Sadly, a short time after his fiancée's passing, Preston passed away as well, from a medical condition. Apparently, even though I have a gut feeling, it was something else. Years went by and life carried on. However, about 5 years ago, I noticed a familiar face enter my dreams. It was Preston's. It was startling the first time because of the unexpected nature of it. If a dream had me in a circle of friends, he would appear as a person just trying to see what the commotion was all about. Subconsciously, I would always try to tell him that he wasn't supposed to be here. However, I could never get the words out. Last year, I had a dream I'll never forget. For whatever reason, I was going on a trip around the country, and wouldn't you know, Preston was a bus driver. After what felt like hours, the bus came to a screeching halt. What was a bus full of people was now empty except for Preston. He slowly walked to the back of the bus where I was seated. The bright day turned to night. I could hear a distant thunder roar. The inside of the bus was completely dark. Every few seconds as he got closer, a strobe light would illuminate. I tried to reach for the back door, but the handle was locked. I was grimacing, shaking in a heap of sweat, trying to get out. I was paralyzed. I could no longer move. During each strobe light flicker, he had a new weapon in his hands. From a chainsaw, to a gun, an axe, and lastly a machete. I remember everything completely going quiet and dark. I took a breath and closed my eyes. When I opened them, the sky lit up from a huge strike of lightning, followed by the loudest crack of thunder. In front of my face was Preston. His face turned insanely freakish, almost like it was burned or scarred. And he said, "I told you so," as he swung the machete at my head. I only have my ex-wife to attest to this next part. I woke up to 4 smoke alarms going off in my house. The 3 bedroom ones and 1 hallway alarm. My ex-wife yelled at me to do something, but I was still paralyzed from my dream. I finally snapped out of it as she was yelling for me to get up. I ran and grabbed our 2-year-old son and told her to get outside. She said, "I can't because of the storm." So I said, "Go in the garage." I grabbed a stepladder from the garage, ran back in and hit the buttons and took the batteries out of the smoke alarms. My ex-wife called the fire department. For some reason, they showed up. They explained to me because of the alarms being so close together, they can trigger each other if one goes off. I explained how I thought it was weird that the batteries would have already lost juice because we just moved into that house, and I made sure to change all alarm batteries. I didn't want to freak my ex out about what happened, so I never told her. Has anyone experienced this phenomenon before? Story number 7. Submitted by Brianna. I lived in a town where methamphetamine and heroin is constantly sold or used, and where my boyfriend and I lived, there's a manufacturing house a couple roads from where we live. I would also like to add that we live nearly on the lake. I'm talking so close, if you keep walking in our backyard, you will drop off into 6 feet of lake water. It was around 3 in the morning, and I was just shutting everything off to lie down and go to sleep. My boyfriend was already out by the time I laid down. We have 2 dogs, a black lab named Crowley and a min pin named Cujo. I was about half asleep and I felt Crowley jump up and go towards the door. And Cujo had his head raised and ears perked, as if he was listening to something. Crowley let out a short, almost quiet bark. I sat up and listened closely. At first, all I could hear was my boyfriend's light snores, but after a couple seconds of listening, I heard very faint scratching noises. At first, I didn't think of anything. I figured maybe the raccoon came back and was eating the cat food we lay out for the stray cats in the neighborhood. When I heard what sounded like someone talking, I shook my boyfriend awake and told him what I was hearing, and I asked him to go check it out. He let out a tired sigh and turned on the lamp on his side table. I grabbed both the dog's collars. He grabbed his metal bat and opened the bedroom door, moved the blanket, and walked out, turning on the lights. I heard him open the front door and the screen door, and I heard him walk down the metal steps. Then I heard the screen door shut. Now, the way our bedroom is set up, we have a dark purple blanket pinned outside our door that doesn't completely reach the bottom. That way we can let the air circulate, but still have privacy in our room if guests were over. A couple minutes later, I heard the screen door open and shut. I noticed that the fur on my dog's backs were standing up, and a deep, low growl came from Crowley. Then I heard the sudden opening and shutting of drawers and cabinets. A very confused and terrified feeling came across me. I let go of my dogs, and Crowley took off. I suddenly heard his very loud barking. I got up and moved the blanket and walked out of our room. To my dismay, I did not see my boyfriend. I saw a very dirty man with ragged clothing, open wounds and track marks on his dirty arms. He seemed to be extremely high. Crowley kept him pinned as I darted out my screen door, screaming for my boyfriend, that there was a man in the house. I found my boyfriend running up from our dock, yelling that there was another that jumped into the lake after he found the man going through the shed. My boyfriend ran inside the house, and I followed the man that was still in the kitchen trying to get past Crowley. My boyfriend charged at him and managed to detain him on the ground while I grabbed the house phone and dialed 911. After what felt like forever, police showed up and arrested the man in our house. They found the other soaking wet man on the land diagonal of ours, if you swam. Turns out the men were wanted for pedophilia, robberies, aggravated assault, and various drug charges. Later on, we found out that the meth house close to us was theirs, where they found dead corpses of horses and dogs and mutilated cats hanging around on strings from the ceilings in the house. I don't know what their true intentions were that night, but I'm thankful for my dogs and my boyfriend. We've decided to move to a different town since then. Story number 8. In 2007, we bought our second home located in Vancouver, Washington, near Portland, Oregon. We were looking for a dream home but ended up with a house from hell. In the following years, we were plagued by malicious phenomenon. A little backstory. My husband and I had been married for about 20 years at this point, and we were looking for a house in a better neighborhood. The first house we owned and were living in was just a perfect house in the wrong part of town. This is another story for a different time. Now, to cut to the chase, we fell in love with this imposter of a dream home. It looked like a great home on the surface, but there was an evil that was hiding behind the scenes. We were anxious to leave our previous house because of the housing market. This new house seemed like a great opportunity, so we jumped on it, and things turned bad from the get-go. While we were moving in, I smelled burning flesh and pipe smoke. This should have made the alarm bells go off, but we were really happy to have a new home, so we just dismissed it. Just a quick note. I knew it was burning flesh because I had been a nurse for several years at this point, and once you experience this smell, it sticks with you forever. After this episode on move-in day, life went about as normal with odd things happening here and there. At least once a day I smelled these smells. But life outside the home was happy, so I didn't think anything of it. I would hear, see, and smell things in the house, but ignorance is bliss, and I didn't want to make something of what I thought was nothing. At the time, my husband couldn't smell or hear anything I was experiencing. I didn't want to make him or any of our friends think I was crazy. I was hearing banging that would get progressively worse when no one was home. I saw shadows moving quickly out of the corner of my eye, and I would smell putrid things like burnt flesh, cigar smoke, sulfur, and a sweet pungent smell, and something that smelled like dirty socks in the house from time to time as well. I would hear stomping up the stairs when I was in the upstairs bedroom, and I would think it was my husband coming home from work, only to find out no one was there. I would call my husband to verify that he wasn't home, and when I would confirm this, it was very unsettling. So much happened in this house. It came to a point where my husband was having these experiences too, and then we had to accept that there was something outside our perception of this world happening in our home. I was seeing a shadow man watching us, and just staring at us from the doorway of our bedroom while we slept. At times, he had his mouth opened in a scream-like state. I would watch him move back and forth down the hallway, as we had a baby gate to keep the bedroom doors open, and I could see most of the upstairs from the side of my bed. He looked like Mr. Clean with his arms folded in shadow form. Our dogs would constantly bark when this would happen. One of our dogs became very vicious during this time. He had previously been a very sweet and well-tempered dog. One fateful night, my husband became an unwilling partner in this living nightmare with me. We were asleep upstairs as normal. The dogs were quiet for a change, and looking back, things were too quiet. At 3:33 a.m., we were awoken with the loudest banging on the front door to the house. It sounded like a battering ram on the front door of the house, and it felt as though the whole house was shaking. We flew down the stairs with the dogs in tow to find no one there. We were expecting to see the SWAT team with how horribly loud and emergent the bangs were. A DVD called Paranormal Entity had flown out of the middle of the DVD rack and landed 15 feet away. Looking back, I have to chuckle a little, as this entity obviously had a sense of humor, or was getting straight to the point with a particular DVD that was manipulated. The only thing we could find out of place was the DVD that had flown across the room. This seemed utterly impossible. The movie was crammed in the middle of other DVDs. You would have to pull relatively hard to get any DVD out of the stand. We looked around and found nothing else out of place, so we went back upstairs and tried to go back to sleep, because we did have work early in the morning. My husband now believed in the experience we were having at this point. 2 nights later, we were sitting down in the living room getting ready to have dinner, and that same DVD flew off the same rack, from the middle of the rack, and it landed across the room again. Now, mind you, not only could you not easily remove the DVDs, but where it landed both times was impossible, even if we were to throw it or drop it. Watching something literally go flying through the air on its own is something that changes you forever. I picked the DVD up and said, "Fuck this," and broke the DVD in half and threw it in the trash. I wasn't going to be intimidated like this in my own house. Following this incident, I bought a digital voice recorder and tried to use it to catch EVPs. I caught what sounded like a party with glasses and dishes clinking several times, and a male voice several times saying things like, "Get out of my house," and what sounded like a little girl laughing. This ended up being some excellent evidence, so we decided to call in a paranormal team to investigate our house and validate what we had been seeing and hearing all this time. To summarize the investigation, they were able to validate and verify most of what had been seen and heard in the house. They brought along 2 mediums, both of which saw 2 black-haired children with blue eyes. One of the children was a little girl that had been hiding in my closet. I had been avoiding that area for years and never really understood why until I saw this evidence. In my husband's closet, the medium saw what appeared to be a dark entity hovering in the back. There was also an old lady-looking thing, like an old hag in the top corner of the bedroom. We found out that there was supposedly a portal at the top of the stairs that led to the bedrooms. This was where the old man had been hiding and able to gain access to the rest of the house. A week after the investigation, they came back with their findings and an action plan which was implemented that very night. Through their research of the house, their historian found out that a bunch of people were shanghaied and brought to where our house sits. To find out, all the houses on the block had been having these kinds of issues since they were built in the late 90s. The historian backed this up with documented proof that our house was associated with the Shanghai tunnels in Portland, Oregon. As stated before, the house in Washington State is far from where they would traditionally carry out this practice. We were shocked that our house was associated with Shanghai tunnels because it was so far from the center of Portland and the river. If you aren't familiar with Shanghaiing, it refers to the capture and illegal sale of able-bodied men to sea captains in need of crew. Middlemen kidnapped men and sold the men off to captains for as little as $50 a head. These poor men were then forced to work on ships bound for the Orient for no pay. According to legend as well, some historical data, men were shanghaied in Portland roughly from 1850 to 1941. Things were supposedly at their worst during Prohibition. They were obviously shanghaied for land work as well. A side note, We also found that during Prohibition, an illegal bar was set up on the land where our house was built, which corroborated the glasses and dishes clanking that were previously heard. We also found out why I was smelling the burning flesh. As it turns out, a bunch of men were shanghaied and brought to where my block sits. They had been there long enough to have families of their own, thus creating more workers for the so-called owners of the land. One day, the elders went to the owners and asked when they were going to be released because they had earned more than enough to gain their freedom back. This caused a confrontation between the owners and the elders. These men were lied to, believing that once they worked off what their owners paid for them, they would be set free. After the confrontation that night, the owners padlocked all the families in their sheds and homes and set them all on fire, burning everyone alive. This is where the burning flesh smell had come from. Where my own house sits, there's an attempt at landscaping in the front yard. We found out that this was a massive grave site. The paranormal team and my husband and I prayed over the grave site and performed a ritual over the grave site and a cleansing of our house. The activity lessened but never completely went away. A year after the blessing and prayer, my mother passed away. I found out that I was diagnosed with cancer. We both lost our jobs and we were foreclosed on both of our homes, among many other hardships and experiences. My husband of 20 years and I ended up separating after all of this. Every family before and after us has faced loss and hardships. I know of 2 marriages already since we moved in 2013 that were broken up by this house. Just because a house looks beautiful on the inside and outside, and because it's a newer house, doesn't mean it doesn't have a dark past. Do your research before making a life investment and buying a house.